Caden Lowell hated airports. The thought crossed his mind again as he glanced irritably at his watch while standing in a long line for security at Portland International Airport. This was his seventh time in the last 3 months. The seventh damn time he had to go through this humiliating ritual, taking off his shoes, pulling out his laptop, putting his liquids in a clear bag. And all this despite his privileged status as a frequent flyer. "Sir, you forgot to remove your electronics from your bag," the security officer said monotonously when Caden finally reached the conveyor belt. He suppressed the urge to roll his eyes and silently took his tablet out of his bag. 43 years old, with graying dark hair and wearing an impeccable gray suit, Caden looked like a typical corporate consultant, which, in fact, he was. A leading specialist in logistics chain optimization, he traveled across the country solving problems that others couldn't, or wouldn't, solve. Finally passing through security and gathering his belongings, Caden checked the time until his flight. An hour and a half. Too much for a man who had turned efficiency into an art form. He sighed and headed for the VIP lounge, grimacing at the sign that read Priority Lounge. Another privilege that really meant nothing more than the right to sit in a crowded room with better coffee and free crackers while you waited for the next delayed flight. It was quite crowded for a Tuesday. Business people with laptops, a few families with children, probably granted access thanks to premium credit cards. Caden found a relatively quiet corner and sank into a chair, mechanically checking his phone. 2 messages from Marianne. "Don't forget that Levi's project presentation is on Wednesday. Call me when you get to the hotel." He didn't reply. Reminders like these from his wife had long been part of the routine of their 26-year marriage. So had his silent nods in response. So had these endless business trips. Like the quiet evenings when they returned home and sat in the living room, each immersed in their phone, exchanging rare phrases about the children or trivial matters. When did it start? When did their marriage turn into a well-oiled machine, with each performing their function without much emotion? Perhaps after the birth of Harper, their first child, or later, when Levi came along, or when he started spending more time traveling than at home. Caden rubbed his eyes and put his phone away. Despite his fatigue, he took out his laptop and opened the presentation for tomorrow's meeting. Numbers, graphs, optimizations. That was what he did best. Unlike human relationships, they never let him down. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" A woman's voice snapped him out of his reverie. Caden looked up and saw a woman about his age standing in front of him, with chestnut hair pulled back in a casual bun and attentive brown eyes. She was wearing a strict dark blue suit, but her smile was warm and relaxed. "Yes, of course." Caden pointed to the seat next to him and moved over a little, although there was actually more than enough room. "Thank you. It's really crowded here today," she said, sitting down and placing a small suitcase next to her. "Although I can't complain, it's even worse in the main hall." "That's little consolation for all the money we pay the airlines," Caden replied involuntarily, surprised at his desire to keep the conversation going. The woman laughed. "You're right, but the coffee here is really better. By the way, I'm Audra Haviland." She held out her hand. "Caden Lowell," he replied, shaking her hand. "Are you flying to Chicago?" "No, Boston. Chicago, I presume." "Yes, a business meeting. The usual." "Let me guess." Audra narrowed her eyes as if studying him. "Corporate lawyer or financial analyst?" Caden smiled, genuinely for the first time that day. "Logistics consultant. I help companies optimize their supply chains, reduce costs, and eliminate bottlenecks. Not the most exciting job." "I disagree. Sounds like the kind of job no one notices when everything is going well, but without which everything falls apart." "Something like that," he said, surprised by the accuracy of her observation. "What do you do?" "I'm a department head at a pharmaceutical company. I do clinical research. She paused. Not the most exciting job to an outsider, but I like it. Especially when you see a drug you've been working on helping real people. Caden nodded, feeling a sudden respect for her. His own work rarely brought him such satisfaction. Numbers on paper, millions saved for corporations he didn't really care about. "Do you fly often?" Audra asked, taking a book out of her bag. "Too often. 2 or 3 times a month, sometimes more." "Oh, I sympathize. I fly once a month and I already feel like it's too much. Your family must miss you." Caden's face darkened involuntarily. "I have 2 grown children. My daughter Harper is studying to be a pharmacist." He smiled unexpectedly. "She'll probably end up working like you someday, and my son Levi just started studying engineering." "That sounds great. You must be proud of them." "Yes, very." He paused. "They're probably the best thing my wife and I ever did." Something in his tone made Audra look at him more closely, but she tactfully decided not to pursue the subject. "How long have you been married?" she asked instead. 26 years. "Impressive. That's rare these days." Caden chuckled. "Yes, I suppose so," he said, falling silent, not knowing what else to say. For some reason, he didn't want to tell this stranger about how he and Mary Ann had slowly drifted apart year after year, about how his business trips had turned from a necessity into a kind of escape, about how, when he returned home, he sometimes felt like a guest in his own house. "My ex-husband also traveled a lot for work," Audra said unexpectedly, as if reading his mind. "That was one of the reasons we divorced." "But only one of many," she smiled. "I'm sorry, that was too personal for a casual conversation at the airport." "It's okay." Caden felt a strange relief at her candor. Airports are strange places. It's easier to talk to strangers here. "I agree. Maybe it's because we're all in a sense outside of our normal lives here, in limbo between point A and point B." Caden nodded, surprised at how accurately she had articulated his own feelings. They continued their conversation, jumping from topic to topic, from favorite books to funny travel stories. Audra told him about her passion for photography and showed him some pictures on her phone, mostly landscapes and architecture. Caden shared a story about how he once got stuck at the Denver airport for a day because of a snowstorm and how a group of strangers organized an impromptu poker tournament. Time flew by. When they announced that Audra's flight was boarding, Caden was surprised to find that more than an hour had passed. "Well, I have to go." Audra gathered her things and stood up. "It was nice meeting you, Caden." "Likewise," he said, standing up too, not knowing why. Audra paused, then took a business card out of her bag. "Here, take my card. If you're ever in Boston and want to grab a coffee," she smiled, "to make up for saving you from boredom at the airport." Caden took the card and looked at it. Audra Haviland, Ph.D., Director of Clinical Research, Amberley Pharmaceuticals. "Thank you," he said, putting the card in his jacket pocket. "I'm in Boston a couple of times a year." "Then maybe we'll meet again." She smiled again and headed for the exit. Caden watched her go, feeling strange. Not attraction, although Audra was certainly an attractive woman, but something more like nostalgia. Nostalgia for a time when conversations were easy, smiles were genuine, and human connections didn't require effort. He sat down again and twirled his phone thoughtfully. 2 unread messages from Mary Ann still glowed on the screen. Strangely, they didn't annoy him as they usually did. Instead, he felt a slight twinge of guilt. 26 years was no joke. 2 beautiful children, a shared home, shared memories. Maybe he had let routine stifle their relationship too easily. Caden put his phone away without replying to the messages. Later, he decided. Right now, he needed to focus on the meeting ahead, on numbers, graphs, and optimizations, the things he did best, the things that never let him down. And yet, as he gathered his things before the boarding announcement for his flight, He paused and took out Audra's business card, studying it carefully once more before tucking it neatly into his jacket's inside pocket. The plane touched down at Cedarhurst Airport with a slight jolt. Caden Lowell unlocked his phone as soon as the overhead sign went dark. It was a familiar gesture after every flight. Only this time, the screen was instantly filled with notifications. 14 missed calls, 12 messages, 3 voicemails. While the other passengers hurriedly got up and retrieved their luggage from the overhead bins, Caden frowned as he scanned the call list. 5 from Harper, 4 from Levi, 3 from Mary Ann, 1 from an unknown number and another from his neighbor. This was strange. His children rarely called him, preferring to send messages, and his neighbor had never called him before. He checked his daughter's messages first. "Dad, call me as soon as you land. It's important. Levi and I are at my place. Come here right away." No explanation. No emojis, which Harper usually sprinkled liberally throughout her messages. Just short, dry facts. Levi was even more concise. "Did you land yet? Call me back. We're at Harper's. Don't call Mom." The last message made his heart race. Don't call Mom. What the hell was going on? A series of calls from Mary Ann came in while he was in the air. Her messages were normal. "Did you land yet? Please call me when you get this." Nothing that would explain the alarm in his children's messages. Caden got up from his seat, barely waiting for the aisle to clear, and hurried toward the exit. He dialed Harper's number as he passed through the terminal. "Dad?" His daughter's voice sounded tense. "Yes, I just landed. What's wrong?" "Not on the phone. Can you come over right away?" "Harper, what?" "Please." There was something in her voice he hadn't heard before, a strange mixture of determination and fear. "And don't call Mom." Caden felt a chill run down his spine. "Okay, I'll be there in 30 minutes. Are you and Levi okay?" "Yes, we're fine. Just come over." The call ended, and Caden quickened his pace. Whatever this situation was, it was clearly beyond the scope of a normal family drama. He headed straight for the taxi stand, ignoring Mary Ann's new calls. In the car, watching the suburbs of Cedarhurst rush by, he tried to piece together the fragments of information. Clearly, something had happened involving his wife. Something the kids knew about but didn't want to discuss over the phone. Something serious enough that they asked him not to contact her. Was she having an affair? Was she hiding an illness? Were they having financial problems? Caden rubbed his temples. In 26 years of marriage, they had been through a lot. The birth of their children, his constant business trips, the death of her parents, periods of estrangement and reconciliation. But whatever was happening now was clearly something new. The taxi driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror and asked cautiously, "Bad news, sir?" "I don't know," Caden replied honestly. "I hope not." His phone vibrated again. This time it was Levi. Caden answered, surprised at how hard it was to swallow. "Dad, are you on your way?" His son's voice sounded unusually serious. "Yes, I'm in a taxi. I'll be at Harper's in about 15 minutes. "Okay," Levi paused as if searching for the right words. "Just be prepared for a serious conversation, okay?" Caden closed his eyes for a moment. "Can you at least hint at what this is about? It's about your mom, isn't it?" "Yes." Another pause. "Listen, Harper and I have been thinking long and hard about what to do. It wasn't an easy decision. Just keep that in mind when you get here." The call ended again, leaving Caden even more confused. What decision? What the hell was Levi talking about? The taxi driver turned onto a quiet street lined with neat middle-class houses. Harper had been living here for only a year since she decided to rent her own place while attending pharmacy school. It was a small but well-kept house on the outskirts of Cedarhurst, close enough to campus and far enough from her parents' house to feel independent. Caden paid the taxi driver and, grabbing his small suitcase, headed for the door. Parked in the driveway was Levi's old Ford, the car Mary Ann and he had given him for his 18th birthday 3 years ago. Next to it was Harper's blue Honda Civic. But there was a third car, a dark gray Toyota Camry that Caden didn't recognize. Before he could knock, the door swung open. Harper, his 23-year-old daughter, stood in the doorway. Her auburn hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and her face was free of her usual makeup. Her large brown eyes were filled with alarm. "Dad." She hugged him with unexpected strength, and Caden felt the tension in his chest ease a little. Whatever had happened, his children were safe. "Hi, sweetheart," he patted her on the back. "What's going on?" Without answering, Harper pulled him into the hallway and closed the door. Levi came out of the living room, tall, thin, with dark hair like his father's, but with the soft features he had inherited from his mother. He nodded briefly and hugged Caden as well. "Glad you're here," he said quietly. Caden looked at his children, suddenly realizing how much they had grown. When had that happened? It seemed like just yesterday he was teaching Levi to ride a bike and Harper was asking him to braid her hair before school. Now standing before him were two young adults with serious expressions and worry in their eyes. "All right," Caden took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I'm here. Now someone explain to me what the hell is going on." Harper and Levi glanced at each other, as if deciding who would start the conversation. Finally, Harper gave a slight nod, and Levi led his father into the living room. "You'd better sit down," he said. Caden sank down on the edge of the sofa, looking at his children. Harper stood leaning against the doorframe, nervously twisting the sleeve of her sweater. Levi sat down opposite him, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "It's about Mom," Levi began, his voice sounding surprisingly calm for a 21-year-old. We found something, and we had to decide whether to tell you or not." "What did you find?" Caden felt his heart beat faster. "She's been seeing another man," Harper replied, her voice barely audible, "for several months, maybe longer." Caden froze. His daughter's words echoed in his head, but he couldn't comprehend their meaning. Mary Ann, his wife, 26 years together, the mother of his children, cheating on him. "Are you sure?" was all he could manage. Levi took out his phone, pressed a few buttons, and handed it to his father. "Absolutely. There was a photo on the screen. Mary Ann was entering an unfamiliar restaurant holding a man by the arm. Tall, with a neat haircut, wearing an expensive suit. They were smiling at each other, and even in this poor-quality photo, you could see how intimate that smile was. "His name is Nolan Chester," Harper said, sitting down next to her father. "He works for an insurance company. We've found out a lot about him." "How long have you known?" "About a month," Levi replied, trying to control the trembling in his hands. "At first, I noticed that Mom was often stuck at work. Then I started getting messages at odd times. One day I stopped by your house and saw her getting into this guy's car." He paused. "She didn't see me. I followed them. They drove to a restaurant outside of town. After that, we started following them," Harper continued, not looking at her father. "It sounds awful, I know, but we had to be sure. And then we decided you deserved to know the truth," Levi finished. "But we didn't know how to tell you, or when. You're always on the road. And then—" He fell silent, as if unsure how to continue. "Then what?" Caden asked, suddenly realizing the story wasn't over. Harper stood up and began pacing the room, wringing her hands nervously. "We decided to take matters into our own hands." Caden looked from his daughter to his son. "What does that mean?" Levi took a deep breath. "It means we made a mistake, a big mistake, and now we have a problem. All of us." At that moment, Caden's phone rang again. The screen flashed with Mary Ann's name. For 5 seconds, all three of them stared at the flashing screen. Then Caden slowly declined the call and placed the phone face down on the table. "Tell me everything," he said, feeling his world crumble. "From the beginning." Harper and Levi exchanged glances again, and this time their eyes showed not only alarm but also something like determination. They had made a choice, and now they had to face the consequences. "It all started 3 days ago," Levi began. "Harper and I decided we couldn't stand watching her cheat on you anymore." As his children told their story, Caden felt a strange numbness growing inside him. It was as if all this was happening to someone else, in a movie or a book. Not to him, not to his family, but the reality was right there, in the distraught faces of his children, in Harper's trembling hands, in Levi's tense voice, and in the fact that the woman he had spent most of his life with had betrayed him in the most fundamental way possible. The creak of an old chair broke the silence that hung in Harper's living room. Caden leaned forward, clenching his fingers together as if the gesture could help him hold on to the reality that was falling apart. "So," he began, trying to remain calm, "who exactly is your mother seeing?" Levi, sitting on the arm of the sofa, took out his phone and silently showed his father a series of photos. They showed Marianne with a tall man in his 50s with a touch of gray at his temples and an expensive-looking watch. "His name is Nolan Chester," Levi said in a dry, almost clinical tone, as if trying to distance himself from his emotions. "He's the director of insurance operations at Evergreen Insurance. He's married with 2 grown children. His wife is Elaine Chester, the district attorney's daughter." "How do you know all that?" Caden looked up at his son, amazed at the detail. "We did a little digging." Harper sat down on the edge of the coffee table across from her father. "After Levi noticed something was wrong." "Start from the beginning." Caden leaned back in his chair, trying to prepare himself for what he was about to hear. Levi and Harper exchanged glances, and Levi nodded to his sister, giving her the right to speak. "It all started about 2 months ago." Harper tossed a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that reminded Caden of his wife when she was younger. "I forgot my textbook at your house and stopped by to pick it up. Mom said she had a business meeting and left looking very dressed up. I didn't think anything of it until I saw a strange number on her phone which she had left charging. The caller was listed simply as in." Harper paused. "And then a text message arrived. 'Can't wait to see you, miss you.'" Caden gripped the armrests of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "I felt like something was wrong," Harper continued, "but I wasn't sure. Maybe it was a colleague who had a playful way of communicating. I told Levi, and we decided to find out." "A week later, I drove home at an unusual time," Levi picked up, "and I saw my mom getting into this guy's car." He nodded at the photo. "They weren't just colleagues. It was obvious from the way she—" He paused, searching for the right words. "The way she acted with him." "And you started following her." Caden didn't say it accusingly, but with a hint of disbelief. "Yes," Harper lowered her eyes. "I know it sounds awful, but we had to know the truth. We took turns following her when we had time. Levi even skipped a couple of classes." "Why?" Caden's simple question hung in the air. Levi looked up, his eyes filled with determination. "Because you deserve to know the truth, Dad. Because it's not fair. Because you've always been—" He swallowed, and behind his feigned confidence, the vulnerability of a young man still in need of parental approval showed through. "You've always been honest with us, with her, with everyone." Caden felt a strange mixture of emotions, the sharp pain of his wife's betrayal and the unexpected warmth of realizing how devoted his children were. "We've gathered evidence," Harper continued, taking out her laptop. "Photos, dates, meeting places. It's all here." She opened a folder with images. Marianne and Nolan entering a restaurant, sitting at a table in a cafe, their hands intertwined, getting into his car. Marianne kissing him near an office building. Caden looked at these photos with detached curiosity, as if studying scenes from someone else's life. This strange feeling of dissociation was the only thing that allowed him to remain calm. "And when were you planning to tell me?" he asked, when the last photo disappeared from the screen. "We didn't know," Harper replied honestly. "At first, we wanted to wait until you finished your important project. Then we thought it would be better to do it in person rather than over the phone. And we were afraid," Levi finished, not looking at his father. "Afraid it would destroy the family." "The family?" Caden smiled bitterly. "It seems your mother already took care of that." There was a heavy pause. Caden stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the quiet street. The children watched him silently, not knowing how to react to his calmness, which seemed more disturbing than any outburst of anger. "How long do you think this has been going on?" Caden asked without turning around. "We're not sure," Harper replied, "but judging by the way they act around each other, at least a few months, possibly longer." Caden nodded as if confirming his suspicions. Something inside him already knew. Perhaps he had noticed the signs but ignored them, immersed in his work, his routine, his own alienation from a marriage that had long since ceased to bring him joy. He turned to face the children. "I'm sorry you had to go through this," he said quietly. "Watching your own mother, taking these photos, deciding whether or not to tell me. This isn't a responsibility children should have to bear." "But we're not children anymore, Dad," Harper replied softly. "We're adults who love their father and don't want him to be deceived." Caden felt a lump in his throat. When had they grown up so much? In his endless travels, in his pursuit of success and financial stability, he had missed that moment. The moment when his little children had turned into thoughtful, caring adults. "Thank you," he said finally, "for your honesty, for caring about me. I don't know what I would have done in your place, but—" He looked at his children with unexpected pride. "You did the right thing. You're not mad at us?" Levi asked uncertainly. "Mad?" Caden shook his head. "No, I'm grateful and amazed, and—" He faltered, trying to sort through the chaos of his emotions. "And I'm sad that our family is in this situation, that your mother, that she put us all in this position." He sat back down in the chair, feeling suddenly tired. The pain of betrayal mixed with a strange sense of liberation, as if a heavy curtain had finally fallen, revealing the truth he had subconsciously felt for a long time. His marriage to Mariana had been dying for years, slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a plant deprived of sunlight. Perhaps the affair was just the final blow in a battle that had already been lost. "There's something else," Harper said, glancing nervously at her brother. "The reason we asked you to come today, why we couldn't wait any longer." "I'm listening," Caden said, sitting up straight, instinctively preparing for the worst. "After we gathered the evidence, Harper faltered, seeking support from her brother. "We decided that simply exposing him wasn't enough," Levi continued in a determined tone. "We wanted justice." "Justice?" Caden frowned. "What do you mean?" "We came up with a plan," Levi said, as if he were talking about a school project rather than interfering in his own parents' lives. "A plan to put this Nolan in his place, to show Mom that she can't just destroy our family like this." "What plan?" The alarm in Caden's voice grew. "We followed them and knew that on Friday, when you left on your business trip, they would be together at our house." Harper spoke quickly, as if rushing to finish an unpleasant confession. "You know we still have keys. And we decided to teach them a lesson," Levi swallowed, looking uncertain for the first time. "A little prank that was supposed to embarrass them, make them think." "A prank?" Caden looked from his son to his daughter and back. "What are you talking about?" "About the plan that got out of hand," Harper replied, panic evident in her voice for the first time. "About the plan that turned into a real nightmare." Caden's phone rang again, cutting through the tense silence. Another call from Marianne. He rejected the call and placed his phone on the table. "Tell me," he said firmly. "Everything. From the beginning." Levi took a deep breath and began to speak. It all started with the idea of just catching them off guard, filming it for evidence. But then the plan got more complicated. "We found out Nolan had a new Tesla," Harper continued. "He always parks it in our garage when he comes to visit his mom. And I thought—" She trailed off, clearly embarrassed by her words. "I thought we could slip something into their wine. Nothing to hurt them, just, Viagra or something." And Levi said he could rig the car so the alarm would go off. "Harmless pranks," Levi said, spreading his hands. "At least that's what we thought. A way to embarrass them, maybe even scare them enough to make them break up." "And what did you do?" "We broke into the house yesterday afternoon when no one was home," Levi said. "Harper slipped some powder into a bottle of wine my mom had already opened, and I messed with Nolan's Tesla in the garage a little." "Messed with it?" Caden raised an eyebrow. "I created a small short circuit that was supposed to set off the alarm when they were busy." Levi rubbed his forehead. "It was just supposed to be a joke, The alarm, a little panic, an awkward situation." "But something went wrong," Caden guessed. "Everything went wrong." Harper covered her face with her hands. "Absolutely everything." Caden felt like he was standing on the brink of something irreparable. Part of him wanted to stop the kids, not hear the rest. But deep down, he knew there was no turning back. The truth, no matter how terrible, was always better than ignorance. "Tell me everything," he said, bracing himself for the worst. "Everything that happened." The Cedarhurst police station was not impressive in terms of architecture. A typical two-story brick building with a flag above the entrance and several patrol cars in the parking lot. Caden stood at the reception desk, waiting for the officer on duty to finish his phone call. It had been just over a day since he had learned what had happened, and in that time he had gone from being a distraught husband to a man with a plan. "Mr. Lowell?" The officer finally hung up. "Your wife is waiting in the visiting room. You may go in." Caden nodded and headed down the indicated hallway. Immediately after talking to his children, he contacted Allison Reed, an experienced lawyer who had already worked with him on several business matters. She acted quickly and efficiently. She obtained permission to meet with Marianne, gathered preliminary information about possible charges, and scheduled a time to discuss strategy. When he entered the room, Marianne was sitting at a metal table with her shoulders slumped. Without makeup and with her hair disheveled, she looked her 51 years and even older. Looking up and seeing her husband, she flinched. "Caden," her voice trembled. "You came." "Of course I came," he replied calmly, taking a seat across from her. "We're still married." Marianne opened her mouth to say something, but Caden gestured for her to stop. "Now is not the time for explanations or apologies. We have more pressing matters to attend to. Allison Reed will be your lawyer. She is preparing the paperwork for your release on bail, but there are a few things we need to discuss." Marianne nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "How are the children?" she asked quietly. Caden took a deep breath, trying to suppress a sudden surge of anger. It was their children who had been dragged into this nightmare because of her betrayal. "They're fine," he replied dryly. "Distraught and upset, as you can imagine. But this isn't about them right now. As for you, Elaine Chester and her father are demanding the maximum charge. Attempted poisoning, malicious injury, arson." "But I didn't," Marianne began, but Caden interrupted her again. "I know it wasn't you," he said quietly but firmly. "I know about Harper and Levi's plan. They told me everything." Marianne stared at him, and there was something like relief in her eyes. "They told you?" "Everything," Caden nodded. "About your connection to Nolan, about your surveillance, about the Viagra in the wine and the device that caused the spark in the car, about your desperate attempts to get your lover out of the house, about his wife showing up. Everything. Marianne cringed as if each word was a blow. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm sure you are," Caden replied emotionlessly. "But apologies won't help us in this situation. Here's what we're going to do. Allison is trying to work out a deal with the prosecutor. We can prove that you didn't put the Viagra in the wine or cause the short in the car. And we'll emphasize that your actions, getting Nolan out of the house, were intended to save his life, not to cause harm." "What about the children?" Marianne's voice sounded alarmed. "Will they be charged?" Caden pressed his lips together. "We're doing everything we can to avoid that. Listen carefully. The official story is that you didn't know about the Viagra in the wine. The short circuit in the Tesla's electrical system was an accident, possibly due to a malfunction in the car itself. You were trying to save Nolan when the fire started and the alarm went off. That's our line of defense." "Is that true?" Marianne asked. "The truth will stay in our family," Caden replied firmly. "Harper and Levi made a terrible mistake, but I won't let them face criminal charges for it, and you shouldn't want that either." Marianne nodded, her face reflecting relief mixed with guilt. "Thank you, Caden. I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," he said, standing up. "Allison will be here soon. She'll give you further instructions. Now I have to go. I have a meeting with the detective who's handling your case." He headed for the door, but Marianne's voice stopped him. "What about us?" she asked in a trembling voice. "What will happen to us, Caden?" He turned to look at the woman with whom he had spent 26 years of his life. He knew every line on her face, every habit, every dream. And yet now she seemed almost a stranger to him. "We're done, Marianne," he said quietly. "I'll file for divorce as soon as this situation clears up. We can discuss the details later when you're home and things have calmed down a bit." He left without waiting for her answer and leaned against the hallway wall, feeling suddenly exhausted. The last 24 hours had been like a nightmare. Endless conversations with his lawyer, his children, the police. Studying the details of what had happened, trying to prevent the worst possible consequences. "Mr. Lowell?" A man in plain clothes peeked out of the office opposite. "I'm Detective Morgan. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me." Caden followed the detective into a small office filled with files and several monitors on the desk. They discussed the details of the incident, Caden's version of events, and the possible consequences. The detective was surprisingly understanding for someone in his profession. "Listen, Mr. Lowell," he said when they were finished. "I can't promise that the charges will be dropped entirely. The Chesters are influential in this town, but I think we can get them significantly reduced, especially considering that your wife acted with the intent to save, not to harm." "I appreciate your help," Caden replied sincerely. "There's something else," the detective said, looking slightly uncomfortable. "The video. It's been circulating quite widely online. The local news even did a report. I'm afraid you and your family will have to endure some public attention in the coming days." Caden nodded. He had already seen the headlines. Scandal in Cedarhurst, lover, Viagra, and fire. The story was perfect fodder for local gossip mongers and those who enjoyed other people's misfortunes. "We'll get through this," he said, though he didn't feel very confident. Leaving the police station, Caden headed for his car, a rental since his own was still at the airport. The next item on his list was the bank. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before starting the engine. Last night, after talking to his children and making his first call to a lawyer, he hadn't been able to sleep. Lying in the guest bedroom at the Harper house, he had stared at the ceiling and thought about his life, a life that had been turned upside down in the space of a day. But strangely, amid the chaos and pain, he was beginning to see glimpses of something new, perhaps even something better. At the bank, he was greeted by his personal financial advisor, with whom he had worked for several years. Caden explained the situation without going into unnecessary details. He and his wife were separating. He needed to divide their joint assets and ensure financial independence. "Of course, Mr. Lowell," the advisor nodded. "We can freeze your joint accounts until the official division of property and open new individual accounts. As for investments—" They discussed the details for over an hour. Caden was grateful to his past for his meticulousness in financial matters. Everything was well documented, all assets accounted for. There would be a fair division without unnecessary disputes. Leaving the bank, he stopped briefly at a cafe across the street to drink a coffee and collect his thoughts. The events of the last few days had thrown him off his usual track, out of the routine that had defined his life for years. Work, home, rare moments with his family between business trips. And all this time, his marriage had been slowly dying, and he hadn't even noticed, or didn't want to notice. Caden took out his wallet to pay for his coffee and noticed the corner of a business card among his credit cards and checks. He pulled it out, smoothing out the creased edges. Audra Haviland, Ph.D., Director of Clinical Research, Amberley Pharmaceuticals. And a phone number written in confident handwriting. The woman from the airport. The conversation that had made him smile for the first time in a long time. The invitation to have coffee if he was ever in Boston. Caden twirled the card thoughtfully between his fingers. Not that he was planning anything romantic. That would be too hasty, too wrong in his current situation. But the mere thought that there was someone out there with whom he felt easy and comfortable gave him a strange sense of hope. His phone vibrated, interrupting his thoughts. It was Allison. "Good news, Caden," his lawyer said when he answered. "Mary Ann will be released on bail tonight. The charges haven't been dropped yet, but we're negotiating. There's a chance she'll get probation or even community service." "Thank you, Allison," Caden replied sincerely. "You're doing amazing. Just doing my job. But, Caden—" She hesitated. "Are you sure about the divorce? Maybe you should wait until everything settles down a bit?" Caden looked at the business card in his hand, then put it back in his wallet. "No, I'm sure," he replied firmly. "Our marriage has been over for a long time, Allison. This situation just forced us to admit it." "I understand," she said without judgment. "Then we'll start working on the paperwork as soon as we resolve the charges." After the conversation, Caden drove home, for the first time since everything had happened. The garage was partially burned and the house smelled of smoke, but the damage was minimal. He quickly gathered the essentials, clothes, documents, his laptop, and left a note for Mary Ann informing her that he was moving into a hotel temporarily and that they would discuss the practicalities of their separation once she returned home. Later, in his room at the Regency Hotel in downtown Cedarhurst, Caden sat by the window looking out at the cityscape. He called his children, assured them that the situation was under control and that they would not face any legal consequences for their actions. They both sounded exhausted but relieved. "What's next, Dad?" Harper asked before hanging up. "Good question. What's next? Divorce. A new place to live. Maybe even a new job." He had been thinking about starting his own consulting practice, one less focused on constant travel. More time for himself, for his interests, which he had almost forgotten over the years of routine. And maybe someday, a new relationship. Not now, not soon, but the possibility no longer seemed so distant, so unlikely. "Everything will be fine, Harper," he replied to his daughter. "Not right away, but it will be." Putting down the phone, Caden took out Audra's business card again and looked at it thoughtfully. Then he opened his laptop and began to look through his business meeting calendar. He had a trip to Boston scheduled in 3 weeks. Maybe by then the situation would stabilize a little and he could afford the coffee she had offered him. For the first time in many years, Caden felt a strange combination of freedom and uncertainty. The end of his marriage had been painful and chaotic, not what he could have imagined. But it was also a new beginning, a chance to reevaluate his life, his priorities, his desires. The phone rang. It was the police officer. "Mr. Lowell, your wife has been released on bail and is ready to leave. Do you plan to pick her up?" Caden paused for a moment. "No," he replied. "I'm sure she can call a taxi. But thank you for the information." "Is everything all right, sir?" The officer's voice sounded slightly concerned. Caden smiled as he looked at the city lights outside the window. "Yes," he said, "everything will be just fine."